We know that it feels good to have a positive mental attitude, to experience hope, faith, love, and purpose. What we may not realize is that these happy emotions affect not just our mental state, but our physical state as well. Positive attitudes are not merely moods, they're biochemical realities. Likewise, medical research has shown that the unhappy emotions of fear, anger, frustration, and despair have negative effects on human health. As Norman Cousins has expressed it, the human spirit is the greatest force of all within the human arsenal. The man who helped cure himself through laughter has found substantial evidence that happiness can have positive physiological effects, including an enhanced immune system. On Insight this month, renowned author and researcher Norman Cousins shares a sampling of his 10 years of experience at the UCLA Medical School, where he studies the status of modern medical care. He's learned that for patients combating serious illness, there is such a thing as a biology of hope. And now here's Norman Cousins explaining how belief becomes biology and how the head comes first.
Until 1978, my entire professional life had been spent in writing and editing, with brief interludes in teaching and government service. I had a deep interest in medical science and the human healing system, reflected in special sections which appeared from time to time in the Saturday Review, where I had been editor from 1940 to 1971. I also had the benefit of my own body as a laboratory. Having fully recovered from several personal illnesses, the editor of the New England Journal of Medicine invited me to contribute an article on one of these illnesses. That article, perhaps more than any other single factor, was to result in invitations to meet with students and faculty at various medical centers. It was also to lead to the obsession that brought me into the medical community at UCLA. This obsession was the need to find proof, or at least to help to create proof, that the human brain could actually bring about changes for the better in the way human beings confront illness. There was abundant medical research to show that the brain, under circumstances of the negative emotions, such as hate, fear, panic, rage, despair, depression, and frustration, that the brain could produce powerful changes in the body's chemistry, could even set the stage for intensified illness. But there was no comparable evidence to show that the positive emotions, purpose, determination, love, hope, faith, will to live, and festivity, that these positive emotions could also affect biological states. It is well known that we have the ability to make ourselves ill. Well, what about the ability to make ourselves well? Suppose it could be proved that positive attitudes might actually help activate healing forces in the endocrine and immune systems. What would the implications of such findings be on the treatment of serious illnesses? In 1978, I accepted an invitation to join the UCLA School of Medicine faculty as a member of the Department of Psychiatry and Biobehavioral Sciences. The head of the department, Dr. Jolyon West, better known as Jolly West, called his department Psychiatry and Biobehavioral Sciences because the title reflected his conviction about the interactions of body, mind, and society. The connection at UCLA quickly became an adventure in learning. We were not merely probing for new clues to internal connections. We were pressing at the portals of infinite mystery. Nothing about the universe is more complex, more resistant to the penetrating powers of systematic thought than human life itself. We had to be careful not to allow presumptions to masquerade as knowledge. Shortly after I arrived at the office assigned to me in the Brain Research Institute, Jolly West dropped by. We discussed various activities that might involve me, including lectures, grand rounds, new developments in hypnosis, and the opportunity to meet with medical students individually. Jolly said, "It helps patients to talk with someone who has come through serious illness." Within a few weeks, I began to receive calls from physicians at UCLA or in the area asking if I would try to bolster their patients' will to live, visiting with them at the hospital or in their homes. Perhaps the most striking patient experience of all came in late 1978. The patient was a judge, then in the terminal stage of cancer. All of his personal and professional life, he'd been known for courage, determination, and a positive outlook on life. His illness, however, had given him the psychology of fatalism. When he relayed to his wife and children there was no hope, and when he said that he expected to die very soon, the effect on his wife and children was catastrophic. The judge's doctor told me that the patient had virtually stopped eating and was resisting intravenous feeding. At the present rate, it was doubtful that he would survive more than 2 or 3 days. When I met the judge, he spoke in hoarse whispers. He said he had been a long-time reader of the Saturday Review and sympathetically followed its enthusiasms and concerns. I thanked him and said that his doctor had given me a briefing on his condition. I said I was also concerned about his wife and sons. His eyes narrowed in a way that indicated he wanted me to explain myself. I said I understood that all his life he had been a fighter for things he considered just and right. I said that one of the things I'd learned at the medical school was that the attitude of the patient had a profound effect on members of the family. Their health could be jeopardized by negative attitudes to the patient. I said I hoped the judge would forgive me if I said his family was anguished by the judge's apparent defeatism. Such defeat might seem natural in anyone else, but in a judge. The judge closed his eyes momentarily. Then he looked at me and uttered just 2 words: "I gotcha." The emphasis and sense of purpose, even in his whisper, were unmistakable, as was the pressure of his handshake before I left. About a week later, I telephoned the judge's doctor. "Something is happening here you'll find difficult to believe," he said. When the nurse began to rig up the intravenous device, the judge demanded that he be given breakfast on a tray. He got the food down and kept it down. How, I'll never know. Later on, he got out of bed and went to the bathroom on his own. When the nurse tried to restrain him, he waved her off and said he could take care of himself. He was crusty and strong-willed, just the way people had always known him. When I asked the doctor if the judge's underlying situation had changed, the doctor said not so far as he could see, but he did feel certain the judge would survive the weekend and then some. And he said the effect on the judge's family was wonderful. The judge's spirits continued to improve. He followed the newspapers and made his usual witty comments. He took walks in the hospital. He chatted with patients. He survived for several weeks more. It was a magnificent example of how the human spirit can make a difference, not just in prolonging one's life, but in bolstering the lives of others. The judge's deep sense of purpose didn't reverse the disease. The cancer had spread so widely to his vital organs that it was only a question of time before it would claim his life. But he was able to prolong his life beyond the expectations of the physician, and even to govern the circumstances of his passing in a way that provided spiritual nourishment to the people who loved him. The clock provides only a technical measurement of how long we live. Far more real than the ticking of time is the way we open up the minutes and invest them with meaning. Death is not the ultimate tragedy of life. The ultimate tragedy is to die without discovering the possibilities of full growth. The approach of death need not be a denial of that growth. The most important recent change in the practice of medicine, I believe, may be represented by the enlarged knowledge and new respect for the apothecary built into the human system. The body possesses an immune system that can actually meet the challenge of illness. Included in the functioning of the immune system are the brain, the spleen, the thymus gland, the bone marrow, the lymph nodes. The immune system is connected to the body's vast network of organs and systems. If one should ask, what are the primary influences on the immune system? The answer is practically everything. The immune system can be affected by biochemical changes in the body, by an invasion of microorganisms, by toxicity, by emotional forces, by behavior, by diet, or by a combination of all of these in varying degrees. Scarcely anything that enters the mind doesn't find its way into the workings of the body. The connection between what we think and how we feel is perhaps the most dramatic documentation of the fact that mind and body are not separate entities, but part of a fully integrated system. I have learned that it is not unscientific to talk about a biology of hope or about any of the positive emotions and their effects. The emotional state of the patient has specific effects on the mechanisms involved in illness and health. Obviously, psychological factors are important in the way physicians communicate with patients. Patients who are emotionally devastated by a diagnosis are hardly ideal subjects for urgent treatment. Does this mean that the physician must conceal or alter his findings in talking to patients? Certainly not. What it does mean is that the physician's communication skills may be hardly less important than his other abilities in creating a stage for effective treatment. There's nothing if not variety in the kind of cases I'm asked to see. A well-known motion picture actor telephoned to say he had pains in his chest. He said he had gone to his cardiologist at the recommendation of his physician. The cardiologist examined him carefully, put him through an exercise test, then said there was a strong probability that he would need bypass surgery. First, he would need an angiogram to determine the extent and location of the arterial blockage. The actor said he was terrified by the entire business and found himself thinking and acting like an invalid. When we met the next day, I could see the evidence of his anxiety. He was pale, he spoke with a slight tremor in his voice, he sat forward in his chair and his hand worked nervously on a pencil. He said he had always prided himself on being in superb physical shape. In fact, he had to be, he said, because this is what his work required. But now he felt that the world was coming down around his ears. He hated the idea of open heart surgery. Apart from the terror of the operation, he thought there was no way to keep the news from getting out. And when that happens, he said, it's curtains. There's no way you can play a romantic lead if moviegoers know of your limitations because of a bad heart. Man, I'm worried, he said. I asked if he had had any previous heart symptoms, whether there was any family history of cardiac problems. That's just it, he said. I've never had any symptoms before. No one in my family has had the slightest heart problem. What happened is that 2 weeks ago, I began to feel something strange in my chest. When I took my pulse, I discovered I was missing a beat now and then. I called my doctor. He told me to come right over. He took some tests, told me not to worry, but wanted me to see a cardiologist who would give me more specialized tests. The cardiologist confirmed the fact of an irregular heartbeat. He scared the stuffings out of me. He said that my irregular heartbeat was the result of a deep underlying cardiac problem. He said my treadmill test showed that I had cardiac insufficiency and blocked arteries, and I would need an angiogram. That way he could find out all about the blockage and could draw up a plan for the bypass surgery. And the actor said, "But that's why I'm so scared. I don't think I could survive all that nonsense. I wish I knew what to do." I told the actor that he might want to get a second opinion. And so I told the actor about Dr. David Conant, who had been most helpful to me personally and who had had considerable success in raising the confidence of patients as an integral part of treatment. Then I asked the actor to describe an average day in his life. He did so. What I found especially striking was that each afternoon he would spend at least an hour in the sauna. I asked about the reason for the sauna. This way, he said, I don't have to worry about my weight. I like to eat. I like candy. I discovered I could eat what I wished because my sauna kept my weight down. Now, forced weight reduction in the sauna, especially if repeated every day, can be hazardous. Profuse perspiration can result not just in dehydration, but in the loss of minerals. For example, the body has to maintain an exchange of sodium and potassium. If the loss of these minerals is severe, the result can affect the electrolytes in the body, one manifestation of which can be a disruption in the electrical activity of the heart. An abnormal heartbeat, or arrhythmia as it is known, can be one of the effects. I asked the actor if he had reported the fact of his daily saunas to the cardiologist. No, he said, we didn't talk very much. he put me right into the tests. The actor accepted my suggestion that he obtain a second opinion from Dr. Conant about the proposed bypass surgery. After a lengthy discussion and various tests, Dr. Conant advised against the bypass surgery. He also advised the actor to be more moderate about the saunas and to take adequate mineral supplementation, not just sodium and potassium, but magnesium, calcium, various others. He told the actor that proper nutrition was essential and advised against foods heavy in fats, sugar, salt, nitrates. Since the tests confirmed the fact of arterial blockage, Dr. Conant suggested a new technique called angioplasty. It's far less drastic than bypass surgery. A small balloon is threaded into the faulty arteries, then inflated. In this way, the channels would be widened and could furnish the heart with the oxygen it required. When I saw the actor after his visit with Dr. Conant, he was a changed man. The tremor in his voice had disappeared, his confidence was restored. He knew that his career was no longer in serious jeopardy. Full communication between patient and physician is indispensable, not just at arriving at an accurate diagnosis, but in devising an effective strategy for treatment. Determination and discipline in creating and following a new lifestyle, together with expert and compassionate medical care, can actually help to create nature's own bypass. The heart can produce its own bypass. Consider the actor whose heart function was impaired because of his daily sauna, and who did not inform the examining cardiologist because, as he said, we didn't talk very much, and he was put right into the tests. This instance is an illustration of the way technology can cut into the time for essential talking and listening between patient and physician. Little wonder that important clues are sometimes overlooked. Doctors are not entirely to blame for spending so little time directly with patients. The central fact here is that doctors don't get paid for talking to patients. In a medical economy dominated by third-party payers, insurance companies, the government, health plans, and so forth, the harsh reality is that doctors get paid mostly for tests and procedures. It's not surprising, therefore, that patients should be subjected to many encounters with expensive medical technology, not all of which is essential or without risk. Finally, it helps to explain why medical costs have skyrocketed in recent years. Whether in physicians' offices or in hospitals, tests now account for the major portion of the physician's fees. Even more serious, of course, is the reduced time for the careful questioning by the physician that holds such a high place in the medical tradition. One of the opportunities afforded me at UCLA was the chance to learn from medical students. Some of the students seemed dubious about the role of the psychological factors in causing disease or in contributing to a strategy of treatment. If a bacillus was identified in laboratory workup, they tended to believe that the way of dealing with it was clear and unambiguous. Prescribe the right antibiotic. They lived in a world of new technology designed to provide the right answers. Everything had a name, everything was in place. On the other hand, references to the need for a patient-physician partnership or to the communication skills of the doctor or to medical ethics were regarded by some of the students as soft and therefore not really important in medical education. By contrast, subjects such as physics, biochemistry, pharmacology, anatomy, and so forth would win the favorite adjective, hard. The reasons, I guess, were not obscure. The soft subjects, so-called, lacked precise answers. The grade conscious student, therefore, could never be sure that the answers on his examination papers would correspond to the professor's judgment. With the hard subjects, however, the correct number of fact was certain to lead to a predictable grade. Students, therefore, tended to steer away from the soft and gravitate to the hard. I was troubled by these habits of thought, for they had unfortunate lines of connection to the world beyond the medical school, where uncertainties and not precise answers lay in wait at every turn. In the years after medical school, much of what had been regarded as hard turned out to be frail or faulty, and much of what had been regarded as soft turned out to be durable and essential. I realized that the admission committees of many medical schools had a tendency to use yardsticks that emphasized contrasting qualities. I could understand the reasons. There are at least 20 applicants for every opening in medical school. Inevitably, this made grades the most tangible measure on which the school could base its admission decisions. Unfortunately, the emphasis on grades had the effect of making pre-medical students fiercely competitive. They tended to become barracudas, chewing up on each other, knowing the only way they could rise to the upper half of the class were if someone were in the lower half of the class. Emphasis on grades is apt to lead to the continued pursuit of the high numbers in different forms, a better address in front of which to hang their shingles, or a specialized practice beyond the economic capacity of the people who most needed their expertise. If people are content to be treated by technologists, there is no reason to be concerned. But if what we want are physicians who understand the individuality of illness, physicians who help patients to develop their own resources in combating illness, then we may also want to give our support to those who want to broaden medical education. I am forced to recognize a vital connection between reassurance and effective medical care. Nothing I've learned in the past decade at the medical school seems to me to be more striking than the need of patients to be reassured. Illness is a terrifying experience. Something is happening that people don't know how to deal with. They're reaching out not just for medical help, but for ways of thinking about their catastrophic illness. In short, they are reaching out for hope. People tell me not to offer hope unless I know hope to be real. But I don't have the power not to respond to an outstretched hand. I don't know enough to say that hope can't be real. I'm not sure that anyone knows enough to deny hope. I've seen too many cases these past 10 years when death predictions delivered from high professional station were gloriously refuted by patients for reasons having less to do with tangible biology than with the human spirit. Admittedly a vague term, but one that may well be the greatest force of all within the human arsenal. The human spirit can't be diagrammed or dissected. It can't be seen by tomographic scanners, and it can't be represented by numbers on a medical chart, yet is the single most identifiable feature of human uniqueness. Unless it is understood and respected, all other facts are secondary. And every once in a while it happens that hope can rekindle one's spirits. It can create remarkable new energies. It can set a stage for genuine growth. At least nothing I've learned is less theoretical than the way the entire world seems to open up when courage and determination are connected to truly important aims. During my 10 years at UCLA, I've been asked to see hundreds of patients. They suffered from various symptoms, went to see their physicians, were referred to specialists, were put through copious tests, were given a flat-out diagnosis of a serious illness. They panicked and experienced a sudden and severe intensification of the underlying disease. Most of the patients I'm asked to see are cancer sufferers, but almost every disease is represented in the total group. Multiple sclerosis, lupus, scleroderma, diabetes, heart disease, Parkinson's, and so forth. What is most striking about these cases is that the illness worsened at the time of the diagnosis. Hardly less striking than the effects of a panic reaction to a serious diagnosis among the cancer patients I saw was the fact that some patients had an opposite experience. They responded with a fierce determination to overcome. They didn't deny the diagnosis. They defied the verdict that is usually associated with it. Was it any significance that a very substantial number of these patients lived significantly longer than had been predicted by their oncologists? One woman in her upper 70s said she had a very clear idea of the turning point for the better in her own case. She said it came very early. It came when the physician told her that he had the results of all the tests at hand and was making an unequivocal diagnosis of cancer. He said it was terminal. and he gave her 4 to 6 months. I looked him straight in the eye, she said, and told him to go straight to hell. God could give me 4 months to live, but not another human being. When I asked how long ago that was, she said 6 years ago. Question: is it possible to inform a patient truthfully about a serious diagnosis and still leave the patient with something to hold on to in the form of sustained hope? Of course it is. I have been with cancer patients at the time of diagnosis. I recall one circumstance in particular. I listened to a physician as he told the truth. He put it in the form of a challenge rather than a death sentence. He was not telling less than he knew, neither was he telling more than he knew. In his medical journals, he had read of hundreds of unexpected remissions. In his own practice, he knew that patients who didn't deny their diagnosis but defied the verdict seemed to do better than others. And so he didn't feel under any obligation to provide any terminal date, nor would he have done so if asked. He was wise enough to know that some people confound all the predictions, and he didn't want to do anything or say anything that would have the effect of a hex on the patient. However remote a remission or recovery in a specific case may appear to be, the physician is obligated to get the most out of whatever may be possible. Since many of the cases I'm asked to see are suffering from advanced high-risk disease, the result is that I am confronted with recurring defeat. Fortunately, there is restorative energy in the occasional patient who does triumph, despite predictions based on the most sophisticated diagnostic technology. Perhaps the most dramatic such case in my own experience was that of a woman, 34, whose breast tumor was biopsied and found to be malignant. Her physician telephoned from San Diego to talk about the case. "This is not a situation where surgery can be considered optional," he said. "The tumor is not an ordinary one. It is like a hand grenade under a thin sheathing of skin. The breast is badly corrugated. It's a life-threatening situation, but she's resisting surgery. The usual reasons: fear of mutilation, loss of femininity, and so forth. I'd be grateful to you," he said, "if you could turn around on this." In fact, she mentioned your name in our discussion. The woman, I'll refer to as Mrs. Young, came to the office. It became apparent to me that she was a person of high intelligence and sensitivity. What happens in surgery, I said, is not just the result of the surgeon's skills, but also how you yourself think about the surgery and the confidence you yourself bring into the operating room. You have the power to program yourself for a good result. Program myself, she asked. How do I program myself? Why should anything I think make a difference? I told Mrs. Young about the studies of patients going into surgery and the difference it made if the patient had high expectations, if the patient looked forward to being liberated from illness rather than being governed by forebodings, and how this seemed to translate into different outcomes. The young woman was interested. "Do you really think I have this kind of power?" she asked. Mrs. Young returned to San Diego. She notified her physician that she was prepared to go through with the surgery. A week or so later, her physician phoned to say that the surgery was canceled. When they took the x-rays just before the scheduled surgery, they discovered the tumor had totally disappeared. I could hardly take in what the physician was saying. "Yes," he said, "I couldn't believe it myself. I'll be glad to send the x-rays. The breast is soft and supple and normal in every way." "But it was not just an ordinary tumor," I said. "You compared it to a hand grenade." "Well, the case is extraordinary," he said, "but it's real. We'll watch it closely, of course, but the important thing is that it has cleared up." The only explanation, I suppose, for what happened is that Mrs. Young's own cancer-fighting capability had risen to the occasion. Since she'd been taking no medication at the time, the only rational explanation is that the full array of immune cells, cells that produce the body's own chemotherapy and infuse it into the cancer cells, one by one, have been able to do the job. When I discussed this case with my colleagues, the consensus was that a new sense of control and her desire to get the most out of the surgery replaced the dread and the anxiety and unblocked her cancer-fighting mechanisms. She knew she had a part to play, and she was determined to do it up to the hill. In general, anything that restores a sense of control to a patient can be a profound aid to a physician in treating serious illness. That sense of control is more than moods or attitudes. It may well be a vital pathway between the brain, the endocrine system, and the immune system. the obsession that brought me to UCLA, an obsession to find scientific evidence that the positive emotions could produce positive biological changes, had produced key elements of the evidence I was looking for. In 1989, after more than a decade at UCLA, I wrote a report to the Dean of the Medical School summarizing my experiences on the medical faculty since coming to UCLA in 1978. And I'd like to conclude this presentation to you with the same statement I used in concluding my summary to the Dean. As I said in my report, if I had the power to bring about only one change in medical education, it would be to double and redouble the attention given to the patient-physician relationship. The way the doctor delivers a diagnosis, the way a doctor creates an environment conducive to effective medical treatment, the way the doctor inspires a patient to become a full partner in a strategy for recovery, the way the doctor takes into account the emotional needs, both of the patient and the members of the family. All these factors are involved in an effective relationship between patient and physician. The major advances in modern medical science give substance to the principle that the mind of the patient creates the environment of treatment. Belief becomes biology. The head comes first.
That was Norman Cousins explaining the power of hope in the healing process. This is Steve King. Join us next month for another edition of Insight. And now please fast forward this cassette to the end to hear Philip Goldberg on side 1.